70,000 years ago, you are alone in the dark. Fire burned low, and something just moved in the trees. Your brain does something automatic. It assumes that thing has intentions. It assumes it wants something. That split-second assumption is the seed of every god ever worshipped, and the unsettling part is that the same reflex is still running in your head right now. So what was actually happening inside that skull in the dark? Not philosophically, mechanically. Because the brain that produced that split-second assumption, that thing has intentions, wasn't doing something mystical. It was running a very specific piece of cognitive hardware. And once you understand what that hardware does, the existence of God stops looking like a cultural accident and starts looking like something that was almost mathematically inevitable. Your brain has a default setting for ambiguous events. When something happens and the cause isn't immediately obvious, a rustle, a shadow, a sudden illness, the brain doesn't return a neutral verdict. It doesn't say, unknown cause, file for later. It assumes agency. It assumes something out there has intentions, desires, a will directed at you. Researchers who study this call the hair trigger version of it the hyperactive agency detection device. The name is almost comically clinical for something so primal, but it captures exactly what's happening. The detector isn't calibrated for accuracy. It's calibrated for speed, and it is set permanently to sensitive. The cognitive anthropologist Pascal Boyer spent years working through why the brain over-attributes agency rather than under-attributes it. And the logic is almost insultingly simple once you see it. If you hear a rustle in the grass and you assume it's a predator and it's just the wind, you've wasted 3 seconds of adrenaline and looked slightly ridiculous. That's the cost of a false positive. If you hear a rustle in the grass and you assume it's just the wind and it's a predator, you're dead. That's the cost of a false negative. Evolution doesn't grade on a curve. The brain that survived was the brain that saw agents everywhere. In the storm, in the disease, in the 3-season drought that killed half the children. Seeing a mind behind every event wasn't superstition. It was the winning strategy, and the brains that ran it are the ones that produced you. This means gods weren't invented. They were detected by a system that was always going to detect them, because the system was never built to distinguish between a real agent and a pattern that merely resembles one. But agency detection alone gives you a world full of threatening, invisible presences. What turns those presences into gods? Entities you can reason about, appeal to, try to negotiate with, is a second piece of cognitive machinery that came online in Homo sapiens in a way it hadn't in earlier hominins. Paleoanthropologists place the full emergence of this capacity at roughly 100,000 years ago. It's called theory of mind, the ability to model what another mind is thinking, wanting, and planning. You already use it constantly. Every time you wonder whether someone is annoyed at you, or try to guess what a friend actually meant by that message, you're running theory of mind. It's what makes human social life possible. But here's what it also does. It doesn't check whether the thing it's modeling actually has a mind. Once you can imagine what something wants, you can project that capacity onto anything. A volcano, a river, a drought, a run of bad luck that feels personal because, to a brain running these two systems simultaneously, everything feels personal. And the moment you can imagine what something wants, you can try to give it what it wants. You can sacrifice, you can pray, you can change your behavior to appease it. Agency detection finds the presence. Theory of mind builds the relationship. That thing in the trees from 70,000 years ago didn't need to be real for the belief to be useful. It just needed to be believed. The brain had already done the rest. But a brain that sees agents everywhere and can model their intentions still hasn't answered the hardest question. Why did belief stick? Said plenty of false positives get corrected. You eventually figure out the rustle was wind. Gods didn't get corrected. They got cathedrals. The answer lies in what belief actually did, for the people who held it, and that's where the machinery gets considerably darker. Here's a quick gut check question. If your brain is genuinely wired to detect agents everywhere, Would you have assumed that rustle in the dark was the wind or something with intentions? Drop your answer in the comments below. Now here's the part that should make you a little uncomfortable. Belief didn't just survive, it scaled. But here's the part almost nobody considers, and it's the part that actually explains why you're still dealing with the consequences today. The cognitive glitch alone doesn't explain why belief stuck. False positives get corrected all the time. You eventually learn the shadow on the wall is just a coat. But gods didn't get corrected. They got Shanidar Cave. Shanidar Cave is in northern Iraq. Roughly 60,000 years ago, Neanderthals were burying their dead there, with what appears to be intentional placement, deliberate arrangement, something that looks unmistakably like ceremony. That's not just interesting archaeology. That's a signal that something like death anxiety was already operating before modern humans even fully arrived on the scene. Something in that brain couldn't just leave a body and walk away. It needed the death to mean something. This is where terror management theory comes in. In the 1980s, researchers Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Jeff Pischinsky built a body of work around one uncomfortable premise. The awareness of your own mortality is cognitively destabilizing at a level that would, without some buffer, essentially paralyze a social animal. You can't build a cooperative group out of creatures who are quietly unraveling every time they're reminded they're going to die. The brain needed a solution, and belief in an order that survives death, gods, afterlives, cosmic meaning, is the only cognitive technology that neutralizes that awareness well enough to let you function. Not because it's true, because it works. That's a genuinely unsettling distinction. So that's the first problem belief solved: death. But it solved two more, and the second is arguably more consequential. Robin Dunbar, the same researcher behind the theory that humans can only maintain stable social relationships with roughly 150 people, found that shared supernatural belief is one of the most powerful coordination technologies ever deployed. A God who watches, remembers, and judges is a cheaper enforcement mechanism than a standing army. You don't need a guard at every door if everyone believes an invisible presence is watching the door. Hunter-gatherer bands that shared a supernatural framework could trust strangers, coordinate sacrifices, and hold together under pressure in ways that bands without shared belief simply couldn't match. More cooperation meant more food, more defense, more surviving children. Gods didn't just comfort people, they policed them, and that made civilization structurally possible, which is either impressive or alarming, depending on how you look at it. Third problem, randomness. This one is quieter, but it might be the most human of the three. A child dies. The hunt fails 3 seasons in a row. There is no explanation that satisfies. And here's what the brain cannot tolerate. Not pain, exactly, but meaningless pain. A God with intentions, even an angry one, is less terrifying than a universe with none. If the God is angry, you have a handle. You can sacrifice, pray, adjust, make a deal. Randomness offers nothing to negotiate with. Belief converts unbearable randomness into a relationship. Polly Wiesner's research on firelight storytelling among the Juyu Huanzi documented something striking. Conversations shifted dramatically after dark, away from practical topics and toward supernatural beings, moral narratives, and invisible forces. The dark itself appears to have been the incubator for meaning. And so the loop closes. The brain that saw agents in the dark, that needed death to mean something and suffering to be negotiable, that brain didn't invent gods as a cultural project. It couldn't help but find them. The 3 problems that made belief indispensable 60,000 years ago are the same 3 problems humans still find hardest to bear. Death, the need to trust strangers, suffering that arrives without explanation. The machinery hasn't been updated. You are, right now, running the same software. Subscribe for more on the ancient brain you're still living in, and watch this one next.